Greetings, social workers. It's Greg. Thanks for spending a little more time with me. And I'm pretty excited to put together this webinar and module on safety first with the subtitle, So You Last. This was a great opportunity for me to reflect on my many years of practice experience and also being in organizations as well as being a leader in organizations and really thinking about what does safe, sustainable practice mean. So hopefully you'll join me in thinking about that. And let me tell you what the module objectives are. So first of all, I want you to be aware that every occupation has hazards associated with it. My dad was a delivery driver, and his occupational hazards were back injuries, which he suffered throughout his 30-year career, and dog bites, which he also suffered. And just to be aware that every profession, every occupation does come with hazards, and we have to be upfront with ourselves and appraising those hazards and finding prevention strategies and early intervention strategies. And that's really what this webinar and module is trying to accomplish with you. I organized it by thinking about home visits first. In much of my career, I've done home visits or run home visiting programs. I absolutely love meeting with clients and families in their neighborhoods, in their communities. And at times it was daunting as well as overwhelming to figure out how to do that in a way that was safe and also really engaging. So I want you to think about home visits as a fundamental part of social work practice, but also to think about some of the specific logistics you can do to carry those out in a safe and engaging way. Social workers do frequently respond to clients who are, for lack of a better word, highly agitated and dysregulated, traumatized, overwhelmed, and who may advertently or inadvertently pose a threat to us as social workers. And so we're going to spend a lot of time in this module looking directly at that so that the signs of that are more obvious to you and that you have some de-escalation strategies in mind. And then the last part of the module is really looking at vicarious trauma, the impact emotionally that this work can have, does have on you now and over time, and how to work with that process. So thanks for tuning in. So in terms of our occupational hazards, I just want to say that depending upon our practice context, in some we work alone, often throughout the day. So for example, if you're in a home visiting program, you are likely to be alone in your car a lot of the day. And so that's certainly a risk factor to pay attention to. I have always loved working in teams even when I'm doing home visits, and really cultivating a sense of a teamship even when I am working independently. But certainly working independently is a risk, both physically and emotionally. Often as social workers, we are in communities that are socially deprived, oppressed, and stressed, and visiting homes of even the most deprived, oppressed, and stressed members within those communities. And so our work just naturally takes us to places that may have dangers in them. Certainly with deinstitutionalization, that is particularly in mental health systems, the upside is self-determination, and the downside is that communities may have more folks in them that are highly agitated, frustrated, and may pose risks. As social workers, we often carry too high of a load often, and also loads that have very high acuity in them. And that can also increase our risk, both in terms of getting exhausted and kind of losing attentiveness, as well as just being in the face of more danger more of the time. Organizations that surround social workers don't often provide, and this really makes me sad to say, adequate training, supervision, or support. So there are structural factors, which is why I'm so excited about the fact that we have a macro practice track, and I want you to think about whether you're in that track or not. How do we build strong organizations that are highly impactful and really do train, supervise, and support workers so that their work is sustainable as well as inspirational? And probably the biggest factor I've run across in my own life is just feeling like I don't have a right to think about risk to myself or prioritize my own needs. I'm definitely naturally a caregiver, probably by nature, but also by experience. And it kind of has felt selfish to think about that. And so I kind of want to go against that culture and say that we absolutely need to think about the risk to ourselves. We absolutely need to prioritize our own needs. And we need to talk about it with each other and in our agencies. And so I kind of want to encourage you to enter conversation and thought around that. I want to talk about risk because risk really is something that is based on your perceptions. And perceptions are based on all kinds of things. Your perceptions could be based in some kind of a bias against certain types of neighborhoods or communities. And that's really something to pay attention to, particularly if you have implicit bias, particularly around low-income communities or community members, then you may actually not only not be serving those communities well, but you may also not be perceiving risks that you really need to be perceiving with other communities where you feel a false sense of security and safety. That said, the other part is that sometimes people characteristically have a low threshold for risk, meaning that they feel super anxious and on alert. And that may be just because it's their temperament, it may be because of prior experiences that they've had in their life or in their work, but they just may be, for a variety of reasons, have a very low threshold for risk and perhaps be overly anxious and overly reactive in a way that actually may not be safe. Similarly, some of us have too high of a threshold for risk. Either just constitutionally, we feel like super untouchable. It could be that we're experienced and we just feel like we really know what we're doing. And having too high a threshold for risk also creates potential dangers around you just not accurately appraising something or maybe overestimating your capacity to handle a given situation. In my career, there have been times when, especially early on, where my threshold was too low and too high at the same time. So I was, like in some situations, really, really overly anxious, and that affected my abilities. And in other situations, I was arrogant and overconfident and just sort of, I don't know, had a feeling of invincibility, which was not based in reality. So I want you to really just think about yourself, think about what threshold you're likely to have going into your field placement, and think about how you counterbalance and sort of whatever bias you might have with whatever natural tendencies you have to be anxious or to minimize threats that you may legitimately face as a social worker. So really, I just want you to do some self-assessment and self-reflection here. I want to be really clear that as a student, there are certain things that we do not allow you to do. And I'm very clear with your field instructors about this as well, although I will say they don't always think I'm serious. And so I want to give the same message to you as well. And I do want to ask you to let your field faculty member know and or me know immediately if some of these things are happening to you in field placement, because it's really not okay. It's really unsafe. And we just cannot put your safety at risk, particularly because you're a student and you're a learner, and we want to be appropriately protective of you. So we do not allow students to do physical restraint of clients. Some of you know how to do that. You've worked in residential treatment facilities or inpatient psychiatric facilities, but even if you're in those facilities now, we ask that students not engage in that particular type of activity. Secondly, although we allow you to use your own vehicle to transport yourself to the community or to home visits, we never, ever, 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 ever let you put a client in your own personal vehicle. You are allowed to use an agency vehicle. So if they have a fleet or they have a Zipcar contract, we do allow that. But in your own personal vehicle, you may never transport a client while you're an MSW student in a university field placement. We also ask that you not transport or be asked to transport clients with very recent histories of violent behavior. If there is a history at all, it should be quite remote and certainly further assessed. And then we ask you always to work at times when there are other staff present or available to you. So we never want you seeing a client from 7 to 8 p.m. when there's no one else in the office, or going on a home visit outside of business hours of your agency. Those are just unsafe practices, even for employees, and we ask you not to engage in them. Also, we ask that your field instructors not assign you cases, for those of you seeing direct practice clients where there's been a client with a history of violence towards staff. And we also ask that they're really thoughtful and discerning about assigning you clients that have higher risk for either suicidality or assaultiveness. Some of our more advanced students certainly have the requisite skills and knowledge, and it is an appropriate learning case for those students, but we really, really need that to be thought through and not just haphazard assignment of dangerous clients to you as a learner. So I do ask you to really be familiar with these policies, stay in touch with us, and just trust that these policies are meant to protect your learning and to help you develop into a competent professional over time. You're going to see a module that focuses on vicarious trauma and emotional safety while doing social work. And it's a really important module to engage with. I want to start, though, by saying that I also want to emphasize all the vicarious resilience that comes from being a social worker, particularly when you cultivate a sense of gratitude over time. You really can absorb the strengths of the clients that you see in the communities. I try to focus not just on their traumas or what horrible things they've been exposed to due to oppression and poverty, but I also really try to take in the amazing adaptability that human beings have, the amazing creativity, the amazing ability to persist. And so one of the great things about the strengths perspective is it's super protective of us as well as of the client. So to really encourage you to engage with that perspective and to really see the strengths and the resilience factors. I feel super blessed about my own life. Very, very grateful. I try to cultivate that, but also when you work with people who've not had opportunities, maybe that you've had, it gives you an opportunity to really examine your privilege and examine your abundance and to really not take anything for granted, and to just have a strong sense of being blessed and a strong sense of gratitude. Over my years, particularly working with adults who've been traumatized, I really have developed a deep comfort with bearing witness to suffering, and I feel that that's deepened my character and made me just a stronger human being. And then I also have been pushed to be empathic, but also to be able to separate and detach appropriately, and also being deeply, deeply supportive of clients and colleagues that I might supervise, but also being comfortable setting boundaries as well. So I really feel that the challenges we face are amazing opportunities to develop into the kind of human being that we wish to become. And so I encourage you to kind of work with that process and shape it. I want to close by just identifying resources and protective practices for you. So we do offer you a field seminar for both years of your experience and in the same cohort, usually with the same field faculty member. And that is our intention, to wrap around each student an intentional professional community, because we believe you need a lot of support at the beginning of your career, but certainly that need for support only persists as you develop. We offer you a field faculty member assigned to you who is available to consult with you and debrief with you. Many of our students have adverse experiences in their field placement. Some of them experience the death of a client, either by violence or suicide or some kind of an accident. Sometimes we respond to things such as, needing to make a mandatory report or needing to call the police that are just extremely overwhelming. And so we really want you to make use of your specialized field faculty to consult, debrief, and get the support you need. Sometimes it can be freeing to talk with someone outside of your agency context who can help you understand and respond to the circumstances we face as social workers. Since you're beginning placement soon, please remember to ask your field instructor and all of your colleagues to orient you how to stay safe. And I encourage you to continue this practice throughout your career. I had the great pleasure of working as a consultant for a child welfare agency. And I went out with emergency response workers for several days in a row. And I asked each person how they kept themselves safe and what little tips they had. And they all had an abundance of strategies about things to look for, pay attention to, that really helped me think about practice and think about safety. So there's tons of practice wisdom around you, so make sure you tap into it by asking. Take the time to develop a professional support network that may be outside of your personal support network. Your friends and your family who aren't social workers, they're not necessarily going to understand what you're seeing and doing every day and how that's impacting you. So find other people that do and really nurture those kinds of relationships. In my life, I've had to use personal community resources to address my triggers, to address things that have happened to me in the past, and also to just address normal distress that I have as I've been in my various roles. And so, it's one thing to be comfortable providing that help always, but certainly seeking that help and receiving it can make you a much stronger helper. So I encourage you to seek help for yourself and be a beneficiary as well as someone who gives help. Try to stay aware of your risks in your practice role and context. Try not to develop a quote unquote suck it up mentality. Just really try to stay cognizant of the risks. Develop a flexible set of practices and approaches that keep you safe and sustain you. In the first class of this semester, students asked myself and another instructor what we did to stay safe or to kind of take care of ourselves. And I felt that my answer was actually very pat and may not have come across as in the way that I want, but the question itself made me think that I do kind of an infinite number of things every day to cultivate my own safety and sustainability. I start the morning with an herbal tea. I definitely take walk and stretch breaks during the day. I definitely think of the things that I appreciate about the people around me. I encourage myself. I exercise 3 times a week. I definitely try to eat nutritious food. I definitely try to hang out with people who are totally fun and chill, where we just sort of really can laugh and enjoy each other's company. So I like to go camping. I'm actually going camping this weekend. So there's a whole bunch of things that most of us have to do every single day and every single week just to be able to stay alive with the work and stay creative and stay tapped into our life force and our empathy. So, that's not a given. And it's a resource that does get depleted. And so you have to have cultivated an approach to really restore and refresh the resource within you. And then my last challenge is I just encourage you to really have a continuous learning approach, really constantly expanding your clinical knowledge and skill so that you're even better prepared to serve your clients. The more prepared you are, the more expertise you develop, the more confident you can feel and the more impact you can have. But I also encourage you to think very much about organizational practice, whether you're in an organizational leadership role or whether you're a clinician. And I would like to just challenge you to really think about practices that are helpful to the communities that need it most, practices that are inspirational, and also practices that, and this is where it gets hard, that are sustainable. And so I leave you with that thought and hope that you enjoy this module and thinking about some of the questions that it provokes. And I look forward to talking to many of you as you go through the process of putting your own safety first.